Hey y'all, and welcome back to the Freight House. Today we're gonna make a mint julep, and I'm gonna give you a little behind the scenes before I start on it. So 2 years ago, mint julep time, I was off shooting Top Chef. 1 year ago, mint julep time, I was literally about to have a baby, like 38, 39 weeks, something like that. This year, mint julep time, I can put them back. So we're gonna learn how to make one, and we're gonna do it.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and don't nobody want to hear it, but it's like this the South got something to say.
Hi, my name is Kevin Blackistone, alongside Dr. Robert Greene II.
Welcome to the award-winning podcast, Our New South, presented by the Levine Museum of the New South in Charlotte, North Carolina.
The Levine Museum connects the past to the future to realize the promises of a new South.
Follow the show, rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and here in Season 3, you can watch our conversations right here on YouTube.
All right, let's get to today's show.
Chef Sara Bradley, welcome to Our New South. Thank you very much for taking our invitation and joining us today. And I assume that you are coming to us from your restaurant in Paducah, Kentucky?
Yes, sir. Paducah, Kentucky. About almost as far west as you can get in Kentucky.
At the confluence of the Tennessee and Ohio rivers. Is that right?
Yeah, there's the Tennessee, Cumberland, Kentucky. The Mississippi's just, a few miles downstream. So, yeah, definitely like river bottom land around here.
And that was a strategic outpost for the Union Army during the Civil War. How did all of this growing up in the South, in that particular part of Kentucky, influence or shape your views and ideas about what the South is?
It's a really interesting question. So Paducah is not really Midwestern. It's not really Southern. It's not really kind of what they call the Golden Triangle in Kentucky, which is Lexington, Louisville, Cincinnati. It is definitely the largest town in Western Kentucky. And I say largest town because I don't know if we're a big O city, but I think that that growing up, I was lucky and I got to travel some as a child. So I always kind of knew that there was a bigger world out there. What I think that probably shaped me the most, and I loved, knowing that I'm talking to some history buffs, and you said, it was a pivotal place for the Union Army, is I'm Jewish. So Paducah has this really interesting Jewish history about it as well. So I think that those things, I think being Jewish, an Appalachian father, a Jewish mother, I think they all they were really inspiring because my parents went off and they saw the world. And so I knew that I was going to kind of exist here and go see the world.
Interesting. And in fact, pointing out your mother and your father, and they are both here as part of immigrant families, right? Your mother from Eastern Europe, and what about your father?
So my father, they say maybe Scotland, maybe Ireland. They've been in Eastern Kentucky for generations and generations. I want to say that generations happen a lot quicker in Eastern Kentucky than they did everywhere else. So, my mother, they were all from Latvia and Prussia.
And you were once quoted as saying, I grew up in a fusion of cultures. My parents came from extremely different backgrounds, and I loved how that manifested in the foods we ate. You went to the University of Kentucky.
Yes, sir.
You left to go to culinary school, where you learned to ultimately develop the cuisines that you serve and have made you famous. So how did all of that come to inspire the food that you make? And what was it that drove you from studying psychology at the University of Kentucky to studying food and creating these foods that hearken to your mother's past and your father's past and all the things that are Southern?
So I'll start by talking a little bit about UK. So I thought for sure I am going to pursue academia. I thought that is what I wanted to do. I got out of college. I graduated. I was working in a psychiatric hospital. I made it about 2 months and I was like, I do not want to work. I thought I wanted to work in a lab, and do research. And I thought, I do not want to do this for the rest of my life. But I had always grown up in a family that had cooked, the center of every celebration, the center of every grievance, everything we did was around food. And so I think that, that was really pivotal for me. I love this story. One time we were children, and my brother and sister and I, we went to Thanksgiving at my Aunt Ebby's house, who lived in Greenville, Kentucky, Muhlenberg County. And we went there and we were going to have Thanksgiving, and she was just, an old Jewish lady. And we walk in, and everybody thinks the big turkey, right? That's what you're going to get. Well, we walk in and there were like boiled beef tongues laying on the table, and she hadn't peeled the taste buds off yet. And my brother and sister and I we were just flabbergasted. Like, how could this be? How could this be? We'll never eat this for Thanksgiving ever again. We were kids, And so I grew up where my celebrations always looked a little different than everybody else's. I was always eating fried chicken and with potato latkes for Hanukkah, and it wasn't rare to have, some bacon braised green beans on the table for Hanukkah as well. So, I had this really interesting clash and not even clash, but mesh of different cultures.
Well, and I just want to say for the record that fried chicken and potato latke sounds pretty tasty right now, but
Right.
I digress. But I think what you really illustrated here is how family is so important to folks across the South, no matter your racial or ethnic backgrounds. And, I'm curious about your career as a chef, because you've gone all over the country in terms of getting training from elite chefs. You worked under Paul Kahn and David Posey at Blackbird at Chicago, for example, both Michelin-starred chefs. John Fraser at Dovetail in New York City. So you've been all over the place in terms of really honing your craft. And you even at one point said you never thought you'd come back to Paducah, what you refer to as quote unquote small town Paducah. But what was it that really encouraged you to finally start your own business and to come back to the South and Paducah in particular?
I started in Paducah, then I moved to UK to go to school. Then I moved out to Charlotte, North Carolina, to go to culinary school at Johnson & Wells. And then I kind of moved around. I was in Birmingham for a little bit. But once I finally, I said to myself, if I don't go to New York City, which I think is what every young culinary chef dreams of, said I'll never go. So picked up, moved to New York City. And that was the farthest I'd ever lived away from my home, from my roots, from my family. And I would see my family and see other families celebrating all of these things and having, I was missing out on a lot of it was the meals I missed out on. So I was in New York for a while and loved it and really learned a lot about technique when I was in New York, I think, the technique of cooking. And I decided I wanted to be a little closer to home. So I came to Chicago, and I was in Chicago. I think Chicago is really where I learned more about how you treat your employees and how you run a business. But then I'm in Chicago, and now I can get to my brother who's in Lexington, or now I can get to my sister in Indianapolis. And I would go home and see my parents, and there was just this energy in Paducah that existed. But it wasn't there when I was a child. It was like a whole shift in, Paducah is a very liberal town. It's a UNESCO city. We have a designation for folk art and craft. One of the first ones, or the first one in America. It's this, you don't know how good it is when you have it, right? And so I would come home to see my folks, and I thought, man, I think I could do this in Paducah. I'd been offered to open a restaurant in New York and Chicago. And I just thought, I'm just going to be, working for somebody else, just hustling for somebody else. And so when the opportunity came up to maybe do it for myself, I just jumped at it.
Well, and a quick follow-up, you mentioned that the energy had shifted in Paducah when you returned. What do you think explained that shift or increase in energy in Paducah when you came back?
I think one is my inability as a child to recognize how much I had, how much there was to offer. But I think that there also was a really big movement when I left in 2000. They had this really kind of cool program in Kentucky, or in Paducah, which became a pilot program for all over the country, where they did this artist relocation program. And they sold artist homes for $1. They got these great tax rates and tax incentives, and they just had to have working studios in these homes, and the city helped them build them back up. So we had this huge influx of artists that had moved to Paducah. It now all of a sudden had this music scene, but maybe I just didn't know about the music scene before. For a long time, Paducah was the only stop in the Green Book between Nashville and St. Louis. Paducah is where you stopped. And so it has this very rich culture and heritage of music here. Lots of bluegrass music, kind of like this river undertone to it. And I think probably I didn't see it. But once all of a sudden you brought all of these artists together and all of these people trying to do cool things, and also a lot of young people, a lot of people my age, we were what we call boomeranging. So we had gone off, we had left, we had learned all kinds of stuff, and we all were moving home. And there were a ton of people moving home at the same time I did. And we all opened businesses together, in the same time period. And so it's just, it was just like, it's, the grass is always greener, right? But then you realize, actually, the bluegrass is great. Like, I love it here. So I came home.
So you're actually part of the reverse migration trend of Southerners who've gone north and have come back. And I think mostly when we've talked about that on our podcast, Our New South, we've talked about it in terms of Black Southerners going north and returning. But you kind of break that mold, and you're suggesting that there are others like you within the music scene and the arts community.
I think that for me, I obviously I thought I was going to pursue academia. I love education. I come from the daughter of a man who people were educated, and all of my grandmothers and aunts and uncles, they're all teachers, right? They're all the way down the line, lots and lots of teachers. And so I felt like I left to go, and I felt like I needed to learn all of these things, right? I needed to expose myself to all kinds of different stuff. And once I felt like that learning of what was going on outside of Paducah and outside of my region, we kind of call it like the Ohio River Valley right here. I saw all that, and I thought, I can have all of those things in Paducah. I can have the culture, I can have the arts, I can have the food, and I can have the other thing, which is a really easy life, right? Like, it is so easy to live in a small town. You drive where you need to go. Things aren't expensive. We're not far from Nashville, so I have access to all those things, but I get to slow down and really take the time to focus on what I want.
Well, in a lot of ways you are teaching though, right? I mean, you are teaching people about Southern cuisine, Southern culture through your cuisine, and maybe a part of Southern culture that people who eat Southern food, like Southern food, celebrate Southern food, don't really think about, and that's the Jewish component. I know if you go to Mobile, Alabama, there's a large Jewish community there as well. Your parents are obviously your heroes. Who are some of your other culinary heroes tied to the South who maybe you try and replicate or bring their food artistry to life?
I think two of them that pop to mind are people who we all graduated from the arts, like a bachelor in arts from UK, but very different stages of our life. One is Weta Michael, who is probably the culinary godmother of Kentucky. She's been doing it for years. She's in Lexington. She has lots of restaurants. She has this ability to share every bit of knowledge that she has in the most endearing way. Like, she never holds on to anything. She also is a fabulous chef, business owner. But I mean, she cooks really kind of classic food, and doesn't try to alter it much. She really embraces what Kentucky cuisine is. Another person that I really look up to is Vish Bhatt. And Vish is the son of an immigrant. I want to say his family, they were either from India or Pakistan. I'm not sure. But he was cooking Southern food, just straight Southern food. And he was dropping all of these little influences in here. He has a beautiful book that he published called I Am From Here. because people would always say, where are you from? Well, I'm from here. Like, he was raised in Lexington, Kentucky, and his wife is from Paducah. So we have this like really great connection. But the way that I have come to know them so much is we all do these fundraising events to create scholarships for, the arts programs at the University of Kentucky. But I've really just come to admire both of them because our paths to where we got were so different and then where we've ended up. But one thing that's pretty similar is we all left and went away to a big city and then came back to the South.
That's cool. So, talking about your food and Southern cuisine in general, what makes for Southern food? Is your food Southern? What would be one of your favorite dishes to make? And why do you think Southern food is so popular? And I usually don't ask four-part questions, so I apologize as a journalist, but those things just pop in mind.
Is my food Southern? I think it is. If you look at our menu, it may not always read extremely Southern, but what we tell guests when they come into the Freight House is that it may not present that way, but when a plate of food goes down in front of you and you taste it, it is nostalgia. This is Southern food. And I think that that's a lot of what Southern food is. I think it's that it tells a story and that it has the power to do so much more than just be food on a plate. So yeah, I think my food is Southern, but from my being able to travel, I pull things from like that Viet Creole. That is like that kind of Creole, Viet, like that stuff, because those are all fishermen, right? So they're all coming up the rivers. They've all been coming to Paducah now and fishing carp and catfish. And so all of a sudden we've started to have all these Vietnamese flavors in Paducah in the past, 20 years or so.
You mentioned twice Kentucky cuisine. So what differentiates Kentucky cuisine from what we may think of as being Southern food? Like, what's its distinction?
I think it's, like I said, it's the location. Okay. We can look and say like, oh, this is the coastal diaspora, or this is the Black diaspora, or the Jewish diaspora. I feel like we can follow those very easily. The thing that we can't always see is that we can see them going places, but we never get to see a spot where they all meet, right? Paducah is a spot where I think Kentucky, where a lot of different cuisines meet. I think it's because of our, the rivers. The whole top of Kentucky is a river, so we're getting these flavors and these ingredients that are coming from all over the place. We have a really classic like meatloaf, right? Meatloaf, it's Southern, it's Midwestern, but they do meatloaf in Cincinnati in kind of a certain way. They use still cut oats. They call it geta. So our meatloaf at Freight House is always packed full of still cut oats. One, it makes it gluten-free, but two, it just makes this really fabulous thing. And so I think the Kentucky cuisine is, we are able to pull from everywhere. This is kind of where all the diasporas meet. This is, I like to say, the middle of everywhere, as opposed to, in the middle of nowhere.
Absolutely. And I can't help but admit that as you were talking about your restaurant, I did pull up the menu. And as someone who's a native Georgian, but now has lived in South Carolina for over a decade, I know that you have shrimp and grits on your menu. And it says here next to it, spicy pork shank, button mushroom, New Orleans barbecue, pimento cheese grits. And I wish I could try that right now. That's why I ate right before this interview began. But I think your answers about Southern cuisine are actually rather fascinating. Throughout the 3 seasons of Our New South, we've spoken to several other chefs and scholars about Southern culinary history, about what defines Southern cuisine. And I think some of the things you've talked about in terms of location, using the ingredients you have on hand, really incorporating local ideas of taste and distinction, really link back to some of those other interviews we've done. But I'm curious as to your perspective on the relationship between Southern cuisine on the one hand, broadly speaking, and an even broader category of American food culture. How influential do you think the South and Southern cuisine has been on American food culture? And what do you see in terms of trends in Southern food that are starting up right now?
Well, I'm just going to tell you, the last time I was in Paris, France, I'm like walking down the street and I see this like fried chicken, and it's, I like look at the menu and it's like braised, like southern braised dandelion greens, which I love dandelion greens, right? With like home style mashed potatoes. I was like, oh my God, I've got to try it. And I went in and it was reminiscent of southern food, but the fact that it's a style of cuisine that has radiated all the way across to the other side of the world, and that people, and this place was busy, like people were in there, they were ready for it. I mean, you go to I could think anywhere else in the country and you're going to get a lot of southern restaurants. I want to go and eat food that makes me feel connected. I want to eat food that I can tell a story from. I don't want to be just thinking about, this like ethereal food that I'm eating. I want to like feel the food. And so I think the trend has been to go back to cooking food that makes people feel connected. We're hunters and gatherers. We eat what we have. And so I think that is a trend, is to move back to what we have. I also see a new trend coming up, which I hate that this has to be a trend, but Jewish people and Appalachian people, mountain people, they've a lot of times the food that they choose to eat was out of necessity, right? It was what they had access to. And I think that very much goes with Southern food, what people think traditional Southern food is. The offcuts, or just, cornmeal and bacon, all of the leftovers, making everything last as long as we can. I always like to think about pot liquor, one of my favorite things. It's literally just the leftover juice, and we have turned it into this like extravagant ingredient.
Right. No, I think that's a really important point. And I want to go back to something that Kevin mentioned earlier about how, even though you didn't go the academic route, and by the way, I think you chose wisely in that regard, you have gone the route of teaching folks about cooking and about food. What was it that got you involved in network television? Because you've become very well known on Top Chef, The Chopped. You're the Chopped champion right now, and you were named the first ever Chopped legend on the Food Network. So what was it that got you from doing your work in the restaurant industry, of course, to actually being on network TV?
So I think there was a time I had a meeting with someone, and, they said, oh, we'd love to have you on this show. And I said, I will never go on a show. I'm never leaving my restaurant. I do not want to be a TV chef. Cut to a couple years later, one of the people that I looked up to, Weta Michael, I get this call, and it was the director of tourism, or the commissioner of tourism for the state of Kentucky. And she's like, listen, we know that you said you don't want to do TV, but we would really love for you to pursue Top Chef. They are coming to Kentucky, and we want to pick someone that we think can represent what this state has to offer. I mean, that's a lot of pressure, but also it makes you feel really good that they think what it is. And I think it's because people have this conception of what someone from Kentucky is. And we from Kentucky, we know that that's not always true. And so I think the opportunity, my mother said it was my civic duty, first of all. She said, your civic duty to go on Top Chef. Think of how you can promote Paducah. Think how you can promote Kentucky. So I think what the shift was the opportunity to go and be an educated person who had traveled, who had gone away and moved home, and was a female business owner, the daughter of, a veteran from the mountains, and, a social worker who was, Jewish. I think that that was it. It was like this one opportunity to go and see if I could do it. And I also am mildly competitive. Some would say very competitive. But once I got on the shows, I realized how much I loved it, and like how much it kind of tweaked every way I thought about every dish, and made me think about food in a whole different way. It just was like my brain just exploded, and I just loved the competitive collaboration that you got from being on those shows. And so once I started, I couldn't stop. It's so much fun.
And you move back and you open up Freight House, which seems to me, reading about it and hearing you talk about it, is more than just a restaurant. It's important for where it is, important for what it does. What was your idea behind Freight House, and how would you assess how you've been able to carry it forward to meet those desires?
So Freight House it's a very interesting name, very, hard to come by. We are located in the Freight House. We're an old vegetable depot. We weren't very imaginative with the name. But this is old vegetable depot. So, when I started thinking about what my food was and all these people I had worked for before, and the fact that I was going to move home, the first thing that came to mind to me was seasonality. I mean, more than location, it's seasonality and sourcing ingredients that we can be proud of. I can't always source olive oil from Paducah, Kentucky. You can get it from Georgia now, and it's absolutely delicious, but, you can't get some of that stuff. So I think the major thing that I wanted to do was kind of create a restaurant that did all of the things that were quintessentially Paducah and Southern and Midwestern and touches of all of my upbringings. But when you walked in, I didn't want you to feel like you were in Paducah. I wanted people to come in and be like, God, I wish my grandmother could have cooked like this. Or like, what is this restaurant doing here? Like, how does this place exist here? And so I think that was kind of the main thing. So all of a sudden I realized that my success on these cooking shows or in the culinary world can directly impact the tourism of Paducah, Kentucky. It's hard sometimes to talk about it because it's kind of, you want to be humble about it, but to also know that people come from all over the world to eat at this restaurant, and they stay in the hotels here, they buy gas here, they shop in the local downtown shops. Like, all of a sudden I realized it could be bigger than just me. It could be about this whole community. And I think that was something that has really pushed me to take Freight House to where it is today.
I mean, it's an incredible story. And I did not realize your mother was a social worker.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
But now it makes a connection, because what you've done with Freight House is more than just serve food. You're doing it to nurture souls as well, through social justice work. How did that begin, and how do you do it?
So not only is my mother a social worker, my father is an attorney. And he one of his big things that he did, he represented school boards. He was always an advocate for, especially for teachers in the school system. So I think that being raised by two people who not only had very fierce work ethics, and not just at work, but at home. Like, on Saturday, we weren't going out and hanging out until all of the sticks were picked up. We worked. And so I think that this probably, and until you mentioned it, I probably didn't even really put it together. But for the first, 3-4 years, my mother was here, sometimes in the very beginning, 60 hours a week with me. My father. Oh yeah. She had always wanted to be a pie maker. She's a great baker, and she'd always had this dream of owning a bakery or a shop. So she retired from being a social worker for about 2 days, and then she came to help me at the restaurant. And my father was a business owner, and I didn't know you don't know how to pay taxes, right? Like, they don't teach you that in school. You don't learn about payroll and, HR and stuff like that. So my parents were here with me every day. My now husband was here all the time. I mean, they would go behind the bar and polish glasses on a Saturday night. So it really was this family-owned restaurant. And so what happened is, when we created the culture from the very beginning at Freight House, I brought in so many of those things that my parents had taught me as a child. And now they're just ingrained, right? It's just embedded, and that's how we do it. So.
And what's the name of the social service that you kind of fund and you've developed?
So just for me, I have a couple different nonprofits that I work with. I used to have a barbecue team that I ran with a bunch of other people. We raised money solely for the rehabilitation and the restoration of historic buildings in downtown Paducah. So that was something that was really important. Right now, I work a lot with like the Lee Initiative and World Central Kitchen, through the James Beard Foundation, a lot of those things. I think that it's mostly about seeing where help is needed and jumping in to fill that spot. I've kind of figured out that's the way to get it done.
It seems like you see your work in the restaurant industry not simply as the work of a businesswoman or even as a chef, but as someone who's an active and engaged citizen in Paducah. And part of that actually includes how you see the impact that your business has on the environment in Paducah. In particular, you really, again, focus on local, in-season, fresh ingredients. You're trying to work on helping out local waterways by making sure you cook up plenty of Kentucky silver carp as well as invasive species in the area. What was it that really inspired you to establish some of these partnerships and to really focus on the environmental and ecosystem ethics of what you do as a chef and a restaurateur?
I love that you said that, like the ecosystem ethics, because I have a lot of times explained to people, they're like, well, why are you serving wild caught local Kentucky catfish? Well, the reason I'm serving it is because, or even the Asian carp, but I have one man who brings us our catfish. He knows where his money is going. He brings it to us. I'm paying my employees with it. They're going back out into our community and they're spending it. So it kind of becomes this like circular thing. We're creating our own ecosystem within this small community of really lifting each other up and having economic impact for each other. So I hope that kind of answers your question, but it's, I think, why did I want to buy local and buy seasonal? And, we have an Amish egg farmer. This is kind of a great story. Years ago, when we first started getting all of our eggs from him, he brings us purple hull peas. So we get purple hull, pink lady, Crowder, black eyes, whatever we want. He'll grow us English peas. That's what he does. He would bring them in trash bags, and everybody would stand around, and you would have to shell a whole quart of peas. Like, you'd have to fill a quart of peas before you could leave at the end of the night. Like, and we had servers and dishwashers, everybody. A couple years later, he said, hey, my children were wondering if you wanted them to shell the peas. And I said, yeah, tell them I'll pay for them. I'll pay them per pound. I'll buy the peas from you and I'll pay them to shell these peas. So I paid them. And then the next year I said, are they going to, shell peas again? And he said, yeah, you won't believe what they did. And I said, they bought like a hand crank pea sheller so that they didn't have to shell all the peas by hand. Now they're shelling peas. And then guess what they did with the money? So they could bust out more peas than they ever could before. The next year they bought an ice cream maker. Like, the old school, you put the salt in it, and they're selling ice cream to all the other kids. And just to be involved at that level of someone those kids, it's such a sense of worth to have a business and to see it succeed. And I feel that every day, right? That's pure joy to get to do stuff like that. So it maybe it wasn't a conscious decision. It just was it seemed like the only decision.
Now, you've said before that in your opinion, when it comes to eating, whether it's at a restaurant or at home, that it's about how, quote, food has a story to tell, end quote. And you just told this wonderful story about the family you've been working with there. But how does food, you would argue, do its best storytelling?
We have family meal here every day at the restaurant. Every day at 4:15, a different cook puts up a meal. They all have their day. They switch it off. And the best family meals are not the ones when we have, expensive steak scraps left over, or we have, some fancy something. They're the ones when they bring in corn that their grandmother and them put up and froze. It's they put up a bunch of sweet corn and they bring it in and they make that with mashed potatoes and fried chicken. This is actually one of my favorite family meals I've ever had at the restaurant. It was put up corn, mashed potatoes, fried chicken, And, we were like, what? And they're like, well, it's KFC. This is like a KFC. They made, they made like the Popeyes gravy. It was like KFC. They're like corn. But the fact that he brought this corn that he had put up with his grandmother, I mean, I think everybody just sat down and like just knew that this was something made with love. And so it's the story, right? It's the everybody knows my favorite thing is grilled cheese, and I love grilled cheese and tomato soup. Like, hands down, favorite, easy, go-to. I'll eat it anytime. And so when they make grilled cheese and tomato soup here for family meal, they are like they're just waiting to see, like, what is it? And they know it's the story because I swear every time they make it, it gets better and better and better. So it's like, even at the basic level of sitting down for a meal with the people you work with for 20 minutes, I grew up standing over a trash can eating out of a quart container in the restaurant. And now we sit down and we have a meal together. And I think that is where it starts, is that they know that there is more to it than just, fueling your body, that there is some, like, we can romanticize eating, right? And so, I mean, I want the story, but I also want the companionship and the camaraderie that you get from food. So yeah, I think and that's what it is, right? These are the stories that we're telling.
I too was looking at your menu, and you have a cocktail that's named after you.
Oh,
Yes, you do.
yeah.
But the alcoholic ingredient, the main ingredient, is vodka. It's not Kentucky bourbon. Is this not sacrilegious? What are you doing?
So that is called Sarah's Dirty Deed.
Yes, it is.
That was actually started as a mock. They were poking fun at me. When I opened the restaurant, I didn't have anything, right? I had moved home from Chicago, and I was living with my parents trying to get this restaurant open. But they live about 20 minutes from here. And so it would be very late night, and I didn't want to drive home, and everybody would be done. And I would ask the bartender, I said, just make me a drink, And she was like, what do you want? And I was like, I don't know, put some pickle juice in it. My legs were cramping. So she made me this vodka, pickle juice, whatever. They called that my dirty deed, that I would drink those at the end of the night.
Well,
But, they're delicious. They are absolutely delicious. They're like sweet pickle juice and vodka.
Oh, pickle juice is a very Southern thing. I know football teams used to use it back in the summertime to stop guys from cramping up. But I particularly like Kentucky bourbon. So when I come to Freight House, I'm going to get a bourbon cocktail.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
See, you got to make a Kevin Blackistone drink now. That is based on bourbon.
Could do that. I mean, we've got some stuff on here.
You do. Very good collection.
Yeah.
So, of course, we call our podcast Our New South. And one of the questions we ask all of our guests is, what does the phrase New South mean to you?
So if we talk about it, the South hasn't been around that long, right? I mean, we really haven't been here for that long. So I think that the New South to me is that it's constantly evolving, that we are growing and we are defying what people think the South is. I also think that, not only do we have people leaving and then resettling here, but we have people coming from all over and settling in the South. And so I think the New South, like I said, a lot of us haven't been here very long. And so I think the New South is taking everyone that's coming into this land, everyone that's coming, and taking what is so beautiful and so important about their food and their culture and kind of integrating it into what has become or what has considered Southern cuisine. And you start to see that all the time. You start to see people barrel aging fish sauce. They're aging fish sauce in bourbon barrels. That fish sauce a lot of times is made from Asian carp bones. Like you start to see all these different influences. And so for me, the New South is just continuing to evolve the food. And I think that, I think it's the best cuisine in the country. So,
well, on that note, we want to go ahead now to a new portion of our program titled Rapid Fire Questions. And I've been looking forward to this because some of these questions I think will be interesting to you as a chef. But first, we're going to begin with this question. Where is your favorite place to be in the South?
Ooh, Kentucky Lake.
Sweet tea or Arnold Palmer?
Oh, so I would go unsweet tea, no lemon, no ice. That's like my jam. Just drink it side with straw, but I'm gonna go Arnold Palmer. Or what's the one? John Daly. Is that what it is? It's called John Daly. When it's like an Arnold Palmer but with vodka.
Well, of course. Of course. What's your favorite Southern word or phrase?
Around here, we combine a lot of words. Around here, you get a lot of jeet or jawl, Jew. That's like jeet is like, did you eat yet? Or jawl is like, did you all? So I love them when they take all the words and kind of smush them together. That and a mess of something. Love a good mess of something.
Who is your favorite Southerner, living or dead?
I don't know. I'm probably gonna go with not a famous person, but probably gonna go with my grandma. We called her Gimper. I'd give anything to be back there. I'd give anything for her to come and eat in this restaurant. And she taught me a lot about food and the way you treat people.
And our final rapid fire question, but perhaps the most important one of all for you. What's the most underrated Southern food?
Oh, goodness. Underrated Southern food. Anything braised in bacon fat. Maybe cornbread. Maybe cornbread cooked with bacon fat. I don't think I was destined to be a good Jewish girl because I like anything. I think it's probably just bacon fat, like just all in all, right? Like people throw that away and I'm like, oh my goodness, keep that. I'm going to go with bacon fat is the most underrated Southern ingredient.
Wow. All right, we'll allow that.
Oh, bacon fat.
Yes. I remember my mother used to keep it in a coffee can on top of the stove.
Right.
Usually Maxwell House coffee, to be exact. Wow. Well, thank you so much for doing this. And I've been to Lexington. I've been to Louisville. But I've never been to Paducah. So I'm going to have to get there.
You will have to come and see us. It's a totally different topography. I think it's very flat, very kind of swampy and sweaty, cypress groves, things like that. You'll have to come down. You can get here in about 3 hours from Louisville.
Okay.
About 2 hours from Nashville.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a deal.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Definitely.
Thank you so much again, Chef Sara Bradley.
Thanks, you guys. It was really great.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and nobody want to hear it, but it's like this the South got something to say.
Our New South is presented by Levine Museum of the New South. Levine Museum connects the past to the future to realize the promises of a New South. To learn more and donate to projects like this, visit museumofthenewsouth.org.
Our New South is produced by Next Chapter Podcast. Thanks to our audio editor, sound designer, and composer, Cal Murdoch, video editor, Justin Cortez, producers Brian Douglas, Alexander Pineras, and Cliff Whitfield, senior producer and writer Byron Hunter, and executive producers Jeremiah Tittle and Frankie Abbott. Please follow the show, subscribe, rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and watch portions of our interviews on YouTube.
Go to youtube.com and search Levine Museum.
Learn more at nextchapterpodcast.com/Our New South.
The South got something to say.
Thanks for listening.